Good day, boys and girls. Today we start with a new topic, the reconciliation of control accounts and the debtors and creditors lists. In grade 9 and previous chapters, you were introduced to the debtors control and the creditors control accounts in the general ledger. These two accounts is what we call the control accounts. The debtors ledger and the creditors ledger, also known as the subsidiary ledgers. In this chapter, we are going to look at the purpose of these accounts and the transactions, omissions, and the corrections of errors that you have not previously done. Internal control over debtors and creditors. Good control over debtors and creditors is very important for a business. A business with good control will have better cash flow. Entries in the business's book will be correct, and this will help to prevent fraud. Procedures with regard to the control accounts and the subsidiary ledgers. The procedures for debtors. An individual account is kept for each debtor in the debtors ledger. The debtors control account is a summary of all transactions with debtors. Remember, whatever happens in debtors control must also happen in the debtors ledger. The debtors list is then compiled from the balances of the debtors' individual accounts in the debtors ledger. The total of the debtors list is then compared to the balance of the debtors control account to check for any differences. As I already said, whatever happens in debtors control must also happen in the debtors ledger. So if there's differences, it means there are some mistakes or omissions that need to be fixed. Procedure for creditors. An individual account is kept for each creditor in the creditors ledger. The creditors control account is a summary of all transactions with creditors. Again, whatever happens in creditors control must also happen in the creditors ledger. A creditors list is then compiled from the balances of the creditors' individual accounts in the creditors ledger. The total of the creditors list is then compared to the balance of the creditors control account to check for any differences. Again, if there's differences, there might be errors and omissions that then needs to be fixed. Let's look at a diagram of the procedures with regard to the control accounts and subsidiary ledgers. Transactions with debtors and creditors take place on a daily basis. These are recorded on source documents and then recorded in the subsidiary journals. From these journals, let's look at each type of transaction and which journals they will take place in. If we look at the debtors, credit sales, we sold on credit to a debtor. The source document there will be a duplicate invoice and it will be recorded in the DJ. Payments by debtors and discount allowed to them will be a duplicate receipt and it will be recorded in the CRJ. Returns by debtor or also allowances given to them will be a credit note and it will be recorded in the DAJ. This on a check, that is when a debtor paid, like the payment by debtors, that is recorded in the CRJ, but they paid by check and this check is then dishonored by the bank. Usually the bank statement is our source document and we will then cancel this check in the CPJ. Interest received, discount cancelled, and bad debts. These are the new transactions that we learned about in the general journal. The journal voucher will be our source document and it will be recorded in the general journal. Now, these are the types of transactions that will affect the debtors. Let's look at the creditors. Credit purchases, when the business buys on credit from a supplier. It will be an original invoice and recorded in the CJ. Payments made to creditors and discount received from them, check counterfoil, and it's recorded in the CPJ. Any returns to creditors or allowances given by them will be either a duplicate debit note or an original credit note, and it will be recorded in the CAJ. And then any interest that we need to pay on overdue accounts or corrections of errors, the journal voucher, and it will be recorded in the general journal. Now, these transactions will take place on a daily basis and will be recorded in the journals on a daily basis. Now, posting from the journals to the individual accounts in the debtors and the creditors ledger is done on a daily basis to keep the accounts up to date. So the debtors ledger, the journals that will be involved there will be exactly the same as above, which involve transactions with the debtors, the DJ, the DAJ, the CRJ, the CPJ, and the DJ. And the creditors ledger, the journals is also the same as above, CJ, CRJ, CPJ, and GJ. These are also done on a daily basis. Posting to control accounts in the general ledger will be done on a monthly basis, as it is a summary of all the debtors and creditors transactions for the whole month. So the debtors control will be exactly the same journals as that we use in the debtors ledger, but we will only post the totals of these journals. The totals is posted to the debtors control, while the individual transactions will be recorded in the debtors ledger. The same applies to creditors control. The totals of all these journals will be posted to the creditors control, while all the individual transactions in the journals will be posted to the creditors ledger. Posting to the control accounts will be done monthly at the end of each month. Then at the end of the month, we will compile a debtors list and a creditors list using the balances in the subsidiary ledgers, and then we will compare these lists with the balances in the debtors control and the creditors control accounts in the general ledger. And this also will take place on a monthly basis. Corrections of errors and omissions. As mentioned previously, the totals of the debtors and the creditors list are compared to the balances of the debtors control and the creditors control accounts in the general ledger at the end of each month. Any differences will be investigated and all errors and omissions will be corrected. The following table shows a list of errors and omissions and how each one should be dealt with. Now, it needs to be noted whatever counts for the debtors control will also count for the creditors control. So the same principles will apply both to the reconciliation between the debtors control and the debtors list as in the creditors control and the creditors list. Errors on the source document or in journal entries. Let's look at an example. An invoice issued to debtor D. Zama was overcast by 240 and entered as such in the debtor's journal. So the amount on the invoice is incorrect and is subsequently recorded in the journal incorrect and will therefore be posted to both the control account and the debtors ledger incorrectly. That means both need to be fixed. So in the correction, both the control account and the debtors list will be incorrect. We will have to deduct 240 from the sales because it's overcast. Overcast means it's too much on the debit side of the debtors control account. But we will also have to deduct 240 from the account of Bizama in the debtors list. Remember, an invoice represents credit sales and credit sales increases. So if the amount is overcast, we need to deduct to fix. And next example, a credit note issued to debtor S. Sindiwe was entered as 200 instead of 150 in the debtor's allowance journal. Now, in the first example, the amount was overcast. It was more than it should be. There we have done the opposite than what we have done originally. An invoice is added, and since it is overcast, we have subtracted to fix it. In this case, the amount is once more overcast. Okay. It is entered as 200 instead of 150. So again, the amount is overcost. So to correct that, since the amount is wrong on the invoice, it will, on the credit note, it will be incorrect in the journal, therefore incorrect in both. So both the control account and the debtors list will be incorrect, and both will need to be fixed. Now, we will have to deduct 50 Rand from the debtors allowance on the credit side of the debtors control account because it is overcost. But when we now get to the list, we need to now think very carefully whether we need to add or subtract. Since we deducted from the debtors allowance does not mean we also have to deduct it on the list. The credit note, what does the credit note usually do? It is decreasing an account. So we have now decreased the account with 200 instead of 150. So we have decreased it with too much. So to fix it, we need to do the opposite. So we will add 50 Rand to the account of S&D in the debtors list to fix it. Incorrect posting to the account of a debtor or a creditor. First example there, an amount of 1,240 in the creditor's journal was posted as 1,420 to the account of Ranchit Traders. It's the correct account but the incorrect amount. Again, the amount is overcost. Now, this means the entry in the creditor's journal was correct, but it was only posted incorrectly to Ranchit Traders. So that means it's only the creditors list that's incorrect, the creditors control is correct. Now, what does the creditors journal record? What type of transaction do we record there? Credit purchases. What does credit purchases do to our account? We will owe them more, so it increases the account. Now, it should be increased with 1,240, but it was increased with 1,420. So it was increased with too much. So the amount is overcost. So a very important principle that you need to learn now is that when an amount is overcost, we do the opposite than the original entry. And when it is undercost, we do the same as the original entry. Now, since this amount is overcost, we will do the opposite. What is the original entry? Credit purchases, it increases. So the difference between the two amounts is 180 needs to be deducted. Since the original entry is added and it's overcost, we now need to subtract 180 from the account of Ranchit Traders in the creditors list. Next example, a debit note of 210 issued to Lomo suppliers was entered correctly in the creditors allowance journal, but posted to the account of LaRue suppliers in the creditors ledger. The amount is correct, but the account is incorrect. Now to correct that, only Lomo suppliers and the LaRue suppliers in the list are incorrect. The creditors control account will be correct. Now, what does a debit note do from the creditors allowance journal? It decreases. So we have decreased LaRue instead of Lomo. So that means 210 needs to be added to LaRue and 210 needs to be subtracted from Lomo suppliers to fix that. Even though the creditors control account is correct, the corrections will be made in the creditors general journal, which will affect the journal debits and the journal credits. Next, a column total in one of the subsidiary journals was incorrectly added. Now, the totals are only posted to the general ledger, not to the debtors ledger or the creditors ledger. So this will only involve the control account. The sales column in the debtors journal was undercost by 200. Undercost means it's too little. That means to correct that, the debtors control accounts need to be fixed, and we need to add 200 to the sales amount on the debit side of the debtors control account. The debtors list will be